So my background here is I've been involved in large format imaging, one way or another for about 22 years now, but with Epson for about 8 years and covering our textile products. By all means, ask questions. I mean, this is really, I'd rather have it more informative rather than just talking to slides that are up here. So what I'm going to go through is just the idea that I have to just go through is what some of the applications people are doing. Hopefully get kind of ideas going, give you a little bit of idea of what we can do. There's some things we can't do with dye sublimation, so it's also helpful to know where that line is. Areas that printer might not have ever been intended for doing, or the technology wasn't intended for something, but people are finding uses for it that's out there, and it's kind of one of those ones that's not, well, technically may not be supported, doesn't mean you can't do it. So there's a lot of applications, a lot of things you can do with this technology. Technically you can do it, but there's stuff that's commercially makes a lot of sense to do. So it's kind of mostly going to focus through just a little bit on things to consider in a product solution, like just what our printers are, but also whether it's an Epson printer or not. Just things to kind of keep an eye open for. Some of the applications with some dollars and cents based on a lot of customer feedback we have and what people are pricing stuff for. So kind of get an idea. Again, it's not a hard set. You have to sell at this price, or here's how much money you're going to make guaranteed. But it gives you an idea of at least what's out there. And then just a couple tips for success. We really want to spend more of the time hands-on. So if you guys got it, and it looks like I don't want to cover that slide. Just let me know. We'll move on. We'll kind of keep moving quick with it. So just to start out, this is kind of the fun part of showing some of the different types of apparel. So I'm going to throw some stuff around. I know you guys have some food things with it, but a lot of products like you'll see here is like jerseys, uniforms. A lot of this is what's done. They'll take the fabric, they'll color the fabric, but then it's cut and sewn after the fact. So this was printed first. The fabric was printed, and then it was put together into a piece. So this is not such a great job doing an all-over sublimation, but making a rustic kind of looking flag. Or better yet, my greenback shirt. Show me the money. Just green. So things in here. This is not a heather green fabric. This is just a texture that we created in Photoshop to make up some of the different words. Well, you'll notice on some of these things in the armpits, in the areas on this all-over sublimation. I have a little video that shows how this works, but on all-over sublimation, usually you're taking the finished garment and then you're just decorating, you're coloring it. Where there's creases and seams, it's going to block the color from getting in there. So a lot of, I think as long as you guys promise not to tell everybody, a lot of little Disney princess dresses. You'll see if you go into a Disney store, you look under the armpits or on the areas, you'll see these kind of green, this white space that's in there. And so what they usually, if you ask about it, what they'll tell you is it's what makes every princess unique. There is no two of a kind.
There's a celery.
Oh, it is. So the reality is, though, is even though there is defects in the armpits where it's not printed, a lot of people do like some of that. Is you can design around it, but the other part is most people don't walk around with their arms way up in the air all the time. So it's usually not considered that much of a big deal. Again, this is the type of shirt. You can see the little patterns and stuff that's going on here. Some of the other ones, just taking t-shirts and just decorating a t-shirt, just putting a graphic in front and center. You can certainly do with dye sublimation as well. It does need to be polyester. That's the catch to it, or predominantly polyester material. It can be
50-50?
So you can. The way I say is technically you can do it. The ink reacts with polyester. So the other 50% of cotton, when you print it, it may look okay, but once you wash it, the ink's only going to stick to the polyester, or will be part of the polyester. So if you're looking for more of a distressed look, spots when the polyester content's below 50%, what you'll see is the fiber of the polyester in there will have color and be vibrant. The other part will not. Some people like that for doing a distressed look. It's just the natural, however that fiber is put together can make that happen. But if you're looking for the most vibrant color, most detailed stuff that's almost near fluorescent, you want to have as much polyester as possible. So a lot of different things people use for apparel. It's in here. I don't cover everything, but all-over shirts are definitely very popular. Cut and sewed sport apparel, but also fashion apparel too. It's in here. A lot of very quick print things that are here. Get into signage, doing applications. I don't have a flag here, but probably some of you have seen little $5 foot-long flags out front of Subway from time to time. This is a product that's called a silicon edge graphic. If I pop it up, this is not stitched, but there's a silicon strip that's in here. We sublimate onto the fabric. This looks like almost like a picture frame. What this is it has a little groove. You the image goes, the little cylinder strip goes in here. It makes it really easy to be able to have these graphics that pop in and out. This one I'm using a double stick tape. I've been using it for quite a while, so it's starting to get wear and tear. Usually these are stitched on, but this is a great way to be able to do signage. The frame costs a bit of money up front, but once this is installed, the fabric, usually for a large 2 foot by 3 foot, is very low cost. And the great thing about it is you can take that fabric, roll it up, put it in a FedEx envelope, mail it out to the customer, and they can just simply put it up. Once it goes up in the frame, it kind of has some tension. It will get all the wrinkles and kinks out of the print, so just kind of a little bit to it. Usually the silicone strips are stitched, but you can do it. There is a 3M makes an adhesive double-sided stick that sticks to the adhesive on one side, the other side sticks to the fabric. It's not great if you're taking it in and out a lot of times, but which is what's happening now when the tacks start to wear down. But if you want to do that where you're installing it, and then the next time you're removing it, you can peel the strips off, the fabric can be recycled, and then you put a new graphic up using the same type.
How do those strips work on large prints?
I mean, it's very consistent. So that's usually the bigger it is, you definitely do want to stitch them in or sew them in, just that way it doesn't slide. But you can do it, but most of the time, a lot of the things, even with a printer like this, a 2 foot by 3 foot silicon edge graphic, this type of display, is actually kind of one of the more common sizes, or even smaller than that. Most of them are not necessarily big. Unless you the airports, you'll see the big 6 foot or 10 foot ones, but most applications.
Just mostly at the conventions.
Yeah. Usually, yeah, because some of the fabrics will have a little bit of give, and there's some tension that goes on. So signage, a lot of different applications that's in here you can do with it. Great thing about this is it is fabric or polyester, which is 100% recyclable. So it's not a water bottle that you have in there. A typical t-shirt that we have floating around, it's about 3 water bottles. That's all it takes to make the fiber. It'll take that water bottle, melt it down, turn it into fiber, and 3 water bottles equals 1 t-shirt. About 5 equal a pair of pants. So it's kind of neat, you can reuse it. Some people are very concerned on the vinyl. If you have customers that are that way that don't want to use vinyl or in products, sublimation with polyester is a great alternative for it. On Decor, we have a bunch of fun things in here. I have some of the things, I know the coffee mugs are a little bit different, but things like some blankets and towels that are on here. Things like tabletops. It's kind of a cool thing, but actually the whole entire table we can sublimate things. It does have to have a polyester material on it or coating on it. But some of the things, if it kind of just, these are just little drink coasters, cork pack drink coasters. The great thing about it is, with this material, if you get it wet, it doesn't matter. If you get it, you need to wash it, you put bleach on it, it doesn't matter. The ink doesn't sit on the surface, it's a part of the material, so it's there for life, and essentially the material is going to break before something bad happens to it. But people use it in the kitchen, like cutting boards or custom bottles and stuff.
You have to coat this before, so that something was made.
So the products that like the one that I have right there is it's a finished product we bought from Unisub, is a company that makes a lot of these custom drink coasters. If you were going to make your own coaster, you would have to have some sort of polyester coating to it, which could be, there's a number of different materials out there that you could do, but the price from Unisub on these are pretty expensive. A little bit other type of ideas, so mouse pads, things like, does anybody have an idea what this is? Okay, if I go like that, and then put my little hand in here, sorry. Your koozies, or drink coolers and stuff. A lot of different products like this. These are easy, very easy to do with sublimation. It's just there's a polyester fabric on one side, and then a foam on the other side to it. Simply pressing it, turn it any color you want, put your graphic in the middle, bottom, top. People use these for all sorts of coolers, for whether it's for soda cans or wine bottles or different things. Or even if you get into like things like some bags. We just made this one a second ago. Different products. These are in the soft goods type side of things. The lanyards are things we will have. Anything that can be promotional. We start getting into things where we get into hard goods. So we have our coffee mugs. I won't bore you guys with too many of these things, but like luggage tags. But even doing photo metal. So this is a product, this is a company that makes this metal. It's already preset, ready to go. It has a 3-year outdoor guaranteed life in Southern California. For signage applications or for photographic for 2 years outdoor. with dye sub. But indoors, this will last for a lifetime, and then some. Sorry, I'm throwing all this stuff at you. Holidays are coming, so little Christmas ornaments, keychains, things that people like to kind of play around with. There's a lot of different, call them like promotional products. Some people call them the trash and trinkets or the tchotchkes. But there are a lot of things where dye sublimation works really well. So people are doing awards, engraving. It's a great way to be able to do that. For water bottles, custom water bottles. It doesn't have to be white. Polyester is a clear material that goes onto stuff. So a lot of the items that are passing around is white. They're frothed up, and so it's a white underline to it to make it really pop. But the water bottle you have right there, if that had a polyester coating, which you may or may not, sublimating onto it, you'd have all the metallic look to it underneath it, the texture, the metal, you can see right through the image. So on some of the images, like for cars, using clear coated metal looks really cool because you see all the metal structure, the metal graining. Yeah, it's some cool stuff. So there's just kind of a little bit of ideas of what the type of applications. There's certainly more things that people are doing, especially when you start getting out into the artsy area. People are doing stuff where they're spray paint or coating driftwood and doing artistic kind of looking things where it's weathered and looks kind of neat. Other people are doing plates, dishware and dinnerware. There's a restaurant that we had everything inside was fluid sublimate. So all the forks, spoons, the tabletops, the plates, the clothing. We did this for an event a few years back. It's just, you can kind of go nuts with it, a little too crazy. But I'm going to switch into this is the first part on type of things. So they kind of give you an idea of what you can do with some of the stuff with dye sub. So polyester, you might have heard me say that a few times, is a really important part. That's what the ink has a reaction with. So they like to get together, and that works. Other materials, doesn't really do so much with. So the way how this works, I got a little short video, but just at the high level, there's 3 steps to the process. So you have your design file, you get yourself ready to go, you click print. That comes out, you get an image that comes out on the printer. We're using what's called transfer paper. This is not the same thing as like an iron-on transfer, t-shirt type stuff. Some people get, because that was called a transfer, is no relation to that at all. The paper is just a vehicle to move the ink over to the item you want to color. The paper doesn't do anything other than just make it so you can move the ink. So once you have that, your paper's printed, you have your image on the paper, you can pair it up with whatever you want to do. The printer is no longer in the picture. So this is what makes this really exciting. You can, all of a sudden now you can get into the printer. I can't put a coffee mug through a printer, that's not going to work. But because it's just the paper, I can then pair my paper up with a coffee mug or something that's 3-dimensional, or things like clothing or fabric that's really long runs. I can do that. I just take the paper and that item, stick them together. And we'll kind of explain that a little bit more in a second here. And then we apply heat. When we apply heat, this is where the magic happens, and it's more fun to show it, so we're going to spend more time doing it. But that heat is what happens, it causes the ink to react. So if I go through this is a short video on how to do all of your sublimation. Very quick, just a few seconds, I'll just go through it. This is what you're looking at in the background is the print software that comes with our printer. But generally, if it was a different printer, there's going to be some print software you're going to open your image up with. So just kind of walking through this workflow, I'm going to start out by opening up the image I want to print. I have this lovely cow t-shirt that I like. So this is just a low-res thumbnail of it. And click print, and it's processing, shoots it over the printer. The printer is printing out my cow pattern onto that paper, and that's it. This is a large heat press. What I'm doing is putting down a t-shirt, and then putting my transfer paper on top of it. Once I get it all flat and smoothed out, I'm going to send it into the oven. The top of this is very hot. It's going to go up and apply heat to it for about 35 seconds, 30-35 seconds. When it comes out, I can then take my paper, remove it off of it. The ink transfers from the paper, during that heat process, transferred from the paper permanently to the fabric that was there. And now I have this wonderful cow colored shirt that's here. So a little bit about that process, what's happening in there. This is as tacky as I'll probably get, unless you guys want to get questions. But what's happening when we put the transfer paper that's been printed into the oven is we have our transfer paper, we have our ink that's sitting on the surface of it, and then we have something with polyester. If you look really close, these are like little polyester molecules, little dots that are there. When we start applying heat, what happens is the heat causes some of the colorants, basically the solids that are on the paper. You notice this. This is dye sublimation print is dormant ink that's on the page. When you start applying heat, it's going to cause that ink to turn into a gas. So it's moving from the paper, the solid on paper, it goes right to a gas and becomes this gas cloud. It mixes with the other colors that are around it in the air, and then it's going to start moving towards the polyester. So things in here. The printer, this is CMYK. So cyan, yellow, magenta, black. But I have green, I have yellow, purple, reds, magenta, or maroons, orange colors. Even though it's only 4 colors, because that ink's blending together, when it actually comes to the surface of it, it blends together to make that unique color that's there. So it's kind of a neat thing, especially when you get into the photograph stuff. Most of the time people hear you need to have, used to be a 6-color printer, and it was an 8-color printer, and a 10-color printer. Now there's 12-color printers, and God knows how many more we have left to go. With dye sub, it's a true continuous process. So even though it's 4 colors, it actually has quite a bit more range than what you might see in a 10-color system that's there. So as that ink starts going in here, we keep applying heat, the ink kind of has a chance to start migrating into that polyester fabric. The polyester gets excited, it's almost getting close to that melting point, about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's spacing out, letting the ink coloring come in. Once we remove the heat, the polyester cools back down. When it does, the color is really locked in with that. It's on par, it's part of the polyester molecules in it. So that color is not going to go anywhere. If you wash it, it's locked into the material. It's not going to go anywhere. You can't feel it on the shirt. The shirts that we pass around, you can't feel the ink because there's nothing there to feel. You're just feeling the fabric. So far, so good. We made it to the techie part.
Well, we've had some fabrics that do change in the wash and coatings and whatnot. And we've actually had companies be a bit rude about when we ask them like what's the deal with that. They don't tell us about that. So that is
There can be, yeah. So the fabric itself usually is okay. When you start putting coatings onto it, what could happen is the coating, if it has some polyester materials to it, can absorb some of the ink, and then the fabric's getting some of it too, and then during the wash, the coating splits off. It's taking some of that color. You might see some of that. A lot of the, most of the apparel clothing, usually the only coatings that they put onto is a moisture wicking, so for performance apparel, which typically doesn't have any effect. The transfer process just goes right through it, as if it wasn't there. Yeah.
So, what about profiling? With this transfer, I mean, do you even really have to worry about it, or do people still, because you're different white points, so you are doing different profiles, or do you like generic across the board?
no, we do profiles where material will be available.
And do you do it after you wash, or do you do it just after you transfer and then you measure it?
So yeah, you print on your transfer paper, put it on your fabric, take those samples, put it through your machine. It'll check the color and all that, and just keep doing that. Just like you would on a vinyl or something, just with fabric.
So you would not profile the paper. When you see the paper, by the way, this is what came out of the printer. After we applied heat, this is what happened. So quite a bit different between the two. And to your point, some of the polyester does behave very similarly, so there's not a huge change to it. But what you may see is some fabrics have different white points, but also some are more coarse weave or more very tight weave. It will change the appearance to how it looks. If you really want to dial it in, you can, and you're dealing with customers for signage that want that Pantone specific colors, very critical to it. Usually, you'll come with profiles too. Very similar to the other spot. It's just a little bit different in how we do the profile. We don't profile the paper. We profile the process for it. So meaning the finished fabric is what we're going to profile, not the transfer paper. I'll certainly answer more of those questions if you guys want to get into that, but sometimes color can get a little tricky and specific. So on the heat transfer side to it, so we have to apply heat to the fabric or to the polyester to be able to make it be receptive, but also allow that ink to do its thing, get activated, become part of it. So usually there's 3 factors to it. There's time, temperature, and pressure. Pressure is usually the most easiest one that's in there. As long as you have a consistent pressure and you're working with it day in, day out, that one usually doesn't change much. But time and temperature are the 2 big variables. That heat press right there, even though it says 400 degrees on it, it may not actually be running 400 degrees. And so depending on if you have 2 of those presses, even though they may read the same, it's important to make sure that are they really running at the same temperature. I'll cover a little bit later on what happens if you have the wrong time and temperature, but those are important parts to it. So there's a couple different types of how to apply that heat. So I know you guys are still eating a little bit here, but anything to take a guess on what's something that's a suitable way to transfer heat to those items? This one up here?
You think? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good. It's a good guess. It was in the last one. There's one over here. Okay. Anybody got another one that might be good? Calendar? What would you use this one for?
It's just long rolls, wet rolls.
This is, if you got a continuous process, so you got long fabric, so you want to run a whole bolt of fabric for the signage, big light boxes, big displays. A large flatbed would just be too big to be able to do that. This is much more compact way to do it. Also a lot more efficient. Just you load a roll of paper in, you load a roll of fabric, and up the other side comes a transferred fabric that's printed. Much easier way to do it if you're working with fabrics. But if you're working with a sheet of metal that's floating around, that doesn't work so hot here. Unless you want to make nice round curved stuff, it's not going to work too good. Anybody got another idea? Something else that could work in here? Cylinder press? I'm going to take a guess. What could you use that for? Perfect. So this one's great for doing mugs. If you're going to make one mug at a time or working at a kiosk, when people usually start in business, they might have a little desktop die-set printer. And what they'll do is when they want to make coffee mugs, they'll just put them on a cookie sheet. There's a little silicone wrap, it's like a big rubber band, keeps the paper onto it. We'll put them on a cookie sheet, put it into the oven at 400 degrees for about 12 minutes. Out comes your cookies, or out comes your mugs, and you're done. So on really hobby kind of level, that's what people are using. But those mug ovens get bigger. There's bigger and bigger. So as you start getting production, there's ovens that you can put in racks, where you can put in, almost like a baker's oven. That you can put in, about 4 or 5 dozen at a time. The guys who are doing a lot of them will have one person putting the wraps on the mugs, feeding into a big heat tunnel. Goes through the tunnel. On the other side, there's another person taking the wraps off and then putting in a cooling rack. And so the guys who are doing 10, 20,000 mugs a day are usually using these type of conveyor ovens to do it. Things in here, this is an oddball one, but just so you got aware of it. People want to do like the foam cases that are all the way wrapped around the foam case, or you want to do things like three-dimensional objects like a flask or shot glasses or different things that people want. Sometimes there's vacuum presses that will cause the paper or cause the films to wrap around the item really good. A little different out there way. Microwave, the only thing use this really has on here is warming up your coffee and then your dice up coffee mug, but it doesn't really do anything. Technically a flat iron can work, but you're never going to have the control and consistency commercially to use that as a pro product. So if you're someone using an iron, don't waste your time. Okay, this is my little bit, sorry this is a little bit Epson focused on this one, but just kind of as you're going through from a product side to it, there's a few things to kind of look for in your product. So preferably the number one thing is make sure that who's building it, do they have the technology? Do they own the technology, or are they just taking a printer that's meant for printing photographs onto photo paper and then converting it and calling it a die-set printer? What's that?
Like Milwaukee?
I'm not going to say any names here, but so just the short version, Epson has a family. We got 3 printers in here. This will only take a second. I might probably plug here. We have 3 printers in our family. What you're seeing up front is a 44-inch roll to sheet, so a sheet of paper at the end. We have one that does roll-to-roll printing, the same speed as part to it. Everything's the same ink set. And they have one that's a very high-volume system. It's really about 3 times faster. It has a lot more features for hands-off printing, where the printer just goes and does its thing and it runs much faster. But all these printers all have the same characteristics. We use the same ink, same type of print head that's in here. It's just differences between the size, the width, the take-up roll, and how much more industrial the printer will be. Yeah.
Like with our DTG, do you have to run it like every other 3 days or whatnot to the ink roll?
Die sub with a printer that is built intended for die sublimation. The inks are matched with the head. There's no issue. These printers, we can shelve them for 6 months, turn them on, and they're ready to go. This is probably the most tolerant ink system that we have.
What is the shelf life of the inks?
The inks themselves, there is on our black, you'll see there's a stirring stick that will kind of redisperse the ink before it does settle. But the inks themselves, in general, we'd like to see, the shelf life is over 2 years for it. If they go beyond that, it's not the end of the world. On direct to garment, it's very critical.
Yeah.
You do not use expired ink. That stuff's like paste. This is a very liquid material. What can happen after, usually within 6 months is ideal. If you go after that, what happens, sometimes the inks can settle. Again, that's why our black, we have a stirring stick that will redisperse the ink to kind of keep it from settling out. If it settles, it's not the end of the world, it's just your color can drift. So if you're looking for that consistency, you're trying to do those Pantone colors, but the ink's really old, that's in there, it's kind of one of those things, it loses some of its freshness to it, yeah.
Do you guys make a 3-meter wide printer? Do
Um,
you have plans to do so?
In the current portfolio we have, the only ones we have is a product we have over in Moore, Italy, a direct-to-fabric machine. It's from a company called Robustelli. It's part of Epson's group, but it's not here in the U.S. yet. So eventually we're bringing that hopefully next year or the year after, but that can't do transfer printing as well as direct-to-fabric printing. A little different. Big difference in these two machines. Currently, no, not in the platform we have right now is a 64 inches, the max width. Yeah.
Cleaning cycle, does it wake up and do a cleaning cycle, or because it's dice of ink, it's not the same as
You
solvent
can
or
program
anything
it
else?
to, or you can change the settings. The default out of the box is once every 3 days, it will just go through and do a clean. You can turn that off so you're in total control of it, so it won't do anything.
Yeah, keep that.
So as we get kind of in there, the thing about the print head, the giant thing behind me, that's really important is having a head that's built for dye sublimation. The ink itself, there's the stuff that keeps all the solids, the dormant ink that's in there. The ink, the actual amount of colorant that's in the ink is only a few percentage points. Most of it is other things in there to make sure that it works well with the printer, that it doesn't pulp together and create basically a big ink clot that's going to prevent or cause problems in your system. There's a lot of things that go into the ink other than just the coloring. When the head is matched with the ink, that's where you know you're not going to have any issues. I can speak to this one. We have a lot of people use our photo printers, so put dye sublimation ink into it. The head, the way how it's built, there's all these different levels in there. One that controls the surface, how to repel the ink so it doesn't stick onto the front of it. There's things that shape how large the dots are, the drops are going to be. Other parts that are like mechanical parts that push it. All those layers are adhered together, basically with glue. Dye sublimation ink will dissolve the glue that's used on our photo print heads. So what happens usually after about 6 to 9 months or so, the layers start shifting because there's nothing holding them together on the printers that are meant for printing photo-based, water-based ink on photo paper. They're not meant for dye sub. They can work, but usually after several months or so, the quality starts changing and they end up with clogging and issues with it. Having it where it's purpose-built for that, it's completely inert. There's no reaction to it at all. It just keeps running. So that's something that's what Epson really tries to bring to the table here is we build our own print heads, we build our own inks. They go together with it. But having something that's in there where the heads are matched with the ink is a really important part for the long-term reliability of it. The last thing I want to do is if you introduce a new machine, every machine always has a little bit of a personality. As much as we want to think that everything's the same, they always have little quirks to it. When you have two machines side by side, how do you get them to look the same? So if you have to change out your printers, that's where you add more variability to it. So having a good machine that runs consistently day 1 to 3 to 5 years later, having the same results is a big advantage in making sure you have consistent quality.
What kind of ventilation do you need with the, can it be in a basement, for example, or does it need to be somewhere it's
It
got-
does not require, there's not like VOCs, like solvents, or things that are in there. What I can tell you from being with the printer, generally you want to have something, you wouldn't want to put it in a sealed room. Just part of the reason why is the papers, when we put a print onto it, in the inks there's some basically rubbing alcohol type thing that's in the ink. So if you're printing a lot of that stuff in there, you might smell a little bit. There's nothing harmful about it, but it just might not be the most pleasant environment. As long as you have something where you don't need forced ventilation or air filtration to it all. But as long as there's airflow around that, where it's not sealed, that's all. There's no requirement for it. Speaking about it safety-wise, though, on the inks, it is important to make sure that any of the products that are being used for signage, customers may not be as picky. We start making baby clothes or sports apparel or swimwear. It's direct contact to your skin. Last thing you want is have someone with a reaction to it. There's a global organization called Oecotex that does this. They got started doing this to prevent like lead paint on children's toys. Way back when they got started doing this. What is a lot of different manufacturers like Nike, Adidas, they work with them. Basically, we need our fabrics. We're going to have this. We have this. You can't have these materials or these regulated or restricted substances. So this company puts this together. It's a global standard. The great thing about this is with the Eco Passport, if you make a product, it's using this ink. If you have fabric that has that Eco Passport to it, that product has a chain of custody, so you can sell it to a company that may require that. So if you do anything with retail, a lot of them will require that you meet the U.S. consumer protection standards. This meets all U.S. requirements as well as globally meets all global requirements. So it's great. You don't have to think twice about when someone goes, well, does it contain this or does it contain that? It meets the standards that are out there. So this is a great way to make sure that you don't have to have all your products sent in for testing. It's a global standard that most organizations use. Transfer paper, and this is, I have my picture of an Epson box up here, but transfer papers, they're not like photo papers or banner materials where you have one with a gloss, one with a satin finish, and one with matte finish. They're really purposed for the application. So what we're using here today is what's called adhesive textile paper. And what it does is the paper itself, you feel this, it feels like there might be like a little waxy coating to it. Yeah, sure. What it is, this paper, when we're using a flatbed heat press, when we transfer that, we turn off the heat, that paper gets hot, the ink it turns to a gas and it's ready to start coloring this and transferring it over. If the paper moves, it's going to keep on transferring it over but in the wrong spot. You need a blurred image or a ghosted image. So in a flatbed press, typically if you're doing the fabric, this is what's called adhesive textile. When you get up to a little over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, the coating to it starts gripping onto the surface of the fabric, almost like masking tape. So when we do that, the paper can't shift at all, so you get really sharp lines, sharp details with the flatbed press for fabrics. The things like the coffee mug, we don't want to have the adhesive stuff in there. It's just going to leave a film to it. So there's a different type of paper, usually called either rigid optimized or photo paper that works well for that. Rigid optimized or like a multi-purpose paper. There's no tap to it, and it allows the ink to transfer through. And there's other types of paper that are geared for more high production fabrics. So those calendar prints, that big roll-to-roll system, usually there's a product called like more like production paper. It's a little lighter weight. It's more economical in running through it, and it can work really good on fabric in those continuous roll type systems. So there's different fabrics that are out there, or different transfer papers that are out there. The big thing is the transfer paper, in case of color management or color profiling, will affect the way how the ink gets released. So if you do change your transfer paper and you're using the same fabric and the same ink, you will get different color results. So you do have to have a profile that factors in the transfer paper and the fabric you use. Yeah.
So I noticed that there's banding on the, does that show up on the fabric?
You tell me? Oh. Glad I made it. So there is on that print that I just passed around, intentionally put the printer into, call it our normal speed. It runs about 325 square feet an hour for fabric. What you see on the paper, never judge a print by the paper that comes out of the die-set printer. Sometimes some things can show up, but a lot of times a little bit of, you'll notice in the banding in there, it's not a light banding or a dark banding. It looks like media feed. What it is just the timing. The first layer absorbs down. The next layer, it overlaps slightly, and when it absorbs down, it creates this little bit of a band. It's just the drying pattern on the paper. It doesn't affect the transfer process to it. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something people look at it and go, oh, no, it's not working right. Transfer it over to the material that you want to do. If you see it there, then you can say, yeah, it's not working right. But a lot of times, with die-set, it's very flexible. You can kind of get away with a lot of things. Okay, last but not least, support. It's important to make sure that it's not just the printer. To use this Sublimation, this printer is worthless. You have to have a heat press. You have to have the materials you're going to use. You need to have software. You need to have the color management support to it. All that stuff is important, as well as also getting it set up and running. Who do you go to for support? When the printer's not working right or you have questions, how do you get that? It's an important part. Whoever you work with, make sure that that's something that you do have that's there. So I think it's, well, it's good. The guy in the back corner over here, just kind of keeping me straight on the line here. It's from Wasatch. This is Brian from Wasatch. And this is a software that comes standard with all the printers that are here, as well as all the profiles for that system. Okay, ready to switch over to, it's a little bit about the printers and what you need in there. we're going to get hands-on with it. The last part that I kind of just have here, last two parts, is just some of the potential for this. So take this for what you will, but this is kind of what we look at. Customers that are looking at doing all over sublimation. What would you, are you doing this today? What do you typically sell a shirt for about?
With the sublimation on for the jerseys, about $36.
Okay. Not bad. Typical price on all over, this is more on the t-shirt side to it, kind of unfashioned thing. This is just a retail price, so if you're doing wholesale or other spots, it can change. We're looking at about $30 for a typical sell price. And that depends on the market and the type of customers you're talking to. If I buy this stuff at retail price, so I'm going to buy one shirt type of things. I'm looking on a Gildan shirt, t-shirt, 100% polyester shirt. That's about $3.65. The print, the ink, and the transfer paper to do a full coverage piece to this is about $2 for that. And so you're looking at the total cost of doing that is about 24. Or so your total profit is about $24. It's not a bad deal. But what do you need to be able to do that? So you need obviously a printer that's in here, and this is again just for kind of illustrative purposes, as well as also a large enough heat press that you can put the t-shirt in. So this little guy over here, I can put a graphic on the front chest area or maybe some sleeves, but I wouldn't be able to do an all-over shirt with this. If I didn't mention it yet, on dye sublimation you don't do pieces, so I can't do the top part and then do the bottom part. You're never going to get the seams to match up perfectly, so you need a big enough press to be able to do that. With a product like the printer that's in front of you, you can do up to about a 5XL size shirt that comes with it. So just kind of an idea from what you can do with that type of printer. On a mug, yes.
Sorry, really quick, does the software come with the purchase of the?
So with the Epson printer, it comes with the printer, it comes with a gallon of ink. It comes with installation, on-site warranty and labor, and roll paper to get going. So the only thing you need to bring is a heat press that's going to be appropriate for what you want, the size, and the fabrics that you want to run with. And then obviously as you keep using it, you need more supplies put into it. You're doing things with the ceramic coffee, or the coffee mugs. These are one of these, like, it seems like such a commodity product, but there's so much money in these things. A lot of times these things run for about $1 or $10 for a custom mug. Christmas time, some guys may be doing some specials that run for $6 or $7. But just to give you an idea, we put our inks in a 1 liter bag of ink, and that's what we pour into the printer. So in here, this pops open, that 1 liter bag I can pour in here. The tank holds at least 1 liter bag. The printer has 4 liters it comes with, but 1 liter of ink is enough to make 20,000 coffee mugs. So the printer out of the box has enough ink to make almost 80,000 coffee mugs. But one color is probably going to go before the others. But we get into that coffee mug. If you're buying one case, so that's about 36 mugs, you're looking about $1.50, $1.60. The ink for it at retail price, it's less than a penny for the ink. The paper, admin in there, just rounding it up, saying 3 cents is what you're going to cost for to be able to do that. You see that even though it seems like such a simple product that it's not that much money, there's a lot of profit in there. The cost to actually make it is nothing at all. If you're buying mugs in bulk, the price goes down quite a bit more lower. Again, the type of equipment you need a printer that you can do this with. So you'll be able to print that transfer paper, and then using something like a oven, where you could use an individual mug press or a big conveyor oven. It's in there, but this is a price for the Hicks large oven you can put in and be able to do 3 to 4 dozen mugs at a time. I've got 2 more of these examples, so if this is boring, I'll kind of keep on going. But personalized blankets, so whether it's photo blankets or you want to do some fun textures, similar type of thing. A 50 by 60 size blanket, retail value about $80. And again, that can change depending on time, how much if you're promoting it or what you're doing, or certainly the artwork that goes on to it. If it's something that you're doing and it's your artwork, there's certainly a lot more value to go into it. But the cost of like this thick Sherpa fleece at retail is about $22 for that size fabric. The ink and transfer paper about $2. Just to give you an idea, so my cost at retail is about $24. Selling it for about $80. Potential in there is quite a bit per blanket. So this is something where that total system does have a big price sticker up there, and that's partly because of the calendar press. Those big roll-to-roll calendar presses, they cost a lot of money. I'm using, in here in this example, I'm using a company called Royal Sovereign. There's a number of different brands that are there, from really good high quality like Practice, to other things like Epson, that make some products that are there to really fit everybody's budget. Last but not least, the photo panels going around. These are a little fun little guys. An 8x10 photo typically sells for about 20 bucks. The cost for it. The panel itself is a little under $6 if you're buying, again, one panel at a time. If you start buying these things more, your price will be lower. But ink and paper, this is funny where I get people go, my ink is too expensive. My ink price in paper combined is being 10 cents out of a $6 item. The ink is really negligible. The whole cost of that is next to nothing when you really add up the cost of material that goes in there. But this is something where if you're running these type of panels, if you're doing quite a bit of these things like 20, 30, 40 a month, you'll break even on the system pretty quickly. That's something. Okay, so far so good? All right, I'm talking a lot. Moving over here. So my last little bit is just kind of some of the things to keep in mind. If you're looking at doing this, it's not as, the system itself can work really simple and be very easy to use. It is not as simple as just file print. So I can't stress that enough, that it's not the same as just a regular desktop printer. There is a couple steps involved, and it does have a human factor to it. But there are some things that you can do to help make sure you have the right spot to start with. So if you deal with customers that send in orders, start off with, and they send you little Facebook pictures that are the size of a postage stamp, garbage in, garbage out. The printer will do a faithful job recreating that garbage. And so if you can get with using a better resolution, better. Generally, most people dealing with print would say 300 dpi is fine. If you can get 300 dpi, it's fine. Honestly, with this system, if you're over 100 dpi, you're probably okay. Because dye-sublimation being turns to a gas and it blends, it softens the image a little bit. So what you'll notice on photos, it might not be as razor sharp as you get with a photo printer, but you're going to get so much more vibrancy, and the material that we're printing onto the medium is quite a bit different. The people like that. It softens it up, but it has a better look to it. So I'll start with the right type of image. If you have that, no problems. When you're printing, this might sound silly, but use the right print settings. So the reason for that is we have, in the software, we have different programs in here for printing onto hard goods and also onto fabrics. One of the things that, I don't know if we had it sent around here, but onto fabrics, for example, one of the big, really popular things people do with cut and sew is making like leggings or yoga pants. That type of fabric, when we print, we want to make sure we put down enough ink on the material so that when the fabric stretches, we can get ink to the backing in there so that it doesn't, all of a sudden, the black doesn't turn like a light gray when it stretches. Very important for that market. You can't have, we call it grin. You can't have that. So we leave the settings in there, put down more ink to be able to do that. We're printing onto hard goods where it's really high resolution. I want to use different settings. It's not going to put down nearly as much ink because the material is not going to shift at all. But also it can resolve it really, you can see all the little details. So we're going to print higher resolution, but not use nearly as much ink. So there's different settings that are in there for the type of materials you're using. Really important. I know this seems like it's kind of obvious, like is it plugged in, it's in here, but probably one of the main calls we get for support usually deal with print settings. So making sure, are you using the right settings for what you're trying to do? Materials. So on the piece of metal that goes around, all those products, there's a film over the top of it, a protective film, so before you print them, it's kind of like on plexiglass, there's usually a blue label you got to take off so you don't get any scratches to it. Before you try to sublimate, make sure that you have all that stuff off. On fabrics, if you have lint that's on there or dust on there, just like the t-shirt that has all the wrinkles on the bottom, that stuff's going to block the ink from getting to the surface. So what happens is you end up with basically a garbage print, or its print is not going to be as good as what it should be. So make sure your materials are set ready to go before you're there. If you're going directly from the printer right to the press, one of the things that happens is our ink is water-based dye-sublimation ink. When we print, that paper absorbs the water, the colorant stays on top of the paper. When we sublimate it, the heat hits it, the colorant, or that basically starts the sublimation process, turns to a gas. Well, what happens to that water? When you put a lot of heat on water, it turns to steam. Yeah, exactly. So steam gets in the way of that gas cloud trying to reach the fabric. The steam gets in the way to it and causes, sometimes you end up with more dulled images. It doesn't look right, you get a lot of texturing as the steam's trying to find its way out. It's pushing the color around. So typically what we'll do is if you print, you don't have to let it sit overnight or anything to it. The moisture that's in there will come out really quick, but if you print immediately and you want to go transfer right away, just put it on a hot surface. You don't have to press the paper. What you're going to do is just put it under the heat element. It'll evaporate out. It'll take all the moisture out of it. Right now, out here, wintertime it's great. As soon as it comes out, pretty much poof, all that moisture is gone. But in the summertime, we have issues with this. Folks in, like I mentioned, like Chicago, it's extremely dry in the winter. So when they print, the paper comes out bone dry. They use that same process, but it's now in the summertime and it's 100% humidity. That paper never has a chance to dry. So you get all the steam and moisture and it changes the color a little bit. So preparing the material before you print, definitely the way to go. Make sure this, again, keep a record of how you're using that heat press, what the right temperature is, right at the right time. Unfortunately, there's not a hard set rule with sublimation. A lot of times we use, for fabrics, we use guideline, we'll say about 30 seconds for 400 degrees Fahrenheit. When we're getting into hard goods, like on the photo metal, that piece of metal that's floating around, it's about 90 seconds at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. But there's some challenges though. We're up pretty high right here, so instead of being 30 seconds on fabric, we actually do it closer to about 25. A little bit different air pressure, things happen that's in here. That photo metal, depending on my heat press, it's a big aluminum panel. Most cookware is made of aluminum that does a great job. Most heat sinks are aluminum, does a great job of wicking out heat. If that heat press can't recover that temperature real fast enough, I'll have to take longer to make sure the temperature comes up. Even though it says 400 now, as soon as it closes and touches the heat sink or that metal sheet, that temperature may drop 100, 150 degrees, in which case the sublimation process doesn't even happen until it comes back up to temperature. So those are things that can affect your time. But what you'll see is, sorry if I'm getting too techy on this one, I'm almost done, we're going to play with this stuff, but you got CMYK, you got 4 inks that are in there. The thing is, they don't all, this magic where it happens from they turn to a gas and they enter the material, they don't happen at the same exact time. So what we'll find is cyan is like one of the first colors, it'll sublimate right away. So if you're pressing, if you're not and magenta is much longer, later it happens. So that 30 seconds is usually the sweet spot where we have on fabrics, 30 seconds, 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about the sweet spot where everything's happening at the same time. If we press it for too low of time, the magenta is never having a chance to really get to where it needs to go to. And the cyan is really strong. So everything takes this bluish, very cool cast to it. If we press too long, the cyan, so first it's like the sprinter at a marathon. Boom, right out of the gate, it's there, but then it starts to fade. It can't keep up with doing it for a long time. It starts losing some of the blue. So what you'll have is the magenta gets stronger as it gets going on longer. You end up with your images becoming much more warmer. So the thing with this is, once you have your settings, once you know what you're doing, stick with it. That's the main part to it. If you have other pieces that are happening, you're changing all the settings all the time, it can make things where it's very difficult to have repeat work to it. Again, not trying to make it sound scary, but just something to be aware of. There is a factor that's here. It's really not that much with the printer. We can do stuff to compensate for it in the printer, but if your heat press keeps changing or your environment keeps changing, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have changing results. Okay, so we want to actually get in here and actually play with this stuff. So far so good. You guys doing okay? Questions at all? This is like too simple, too much over the top? Okay. So what we're going to start out with is, you guys don't mind, I have a couple different products that we have here. We got some towels, we got some bags, some different things that are here. Let me just start a new. So I can see over here in the corner. Okay, so this is a program called Wasatch, or Wasatch software. What this lets me do is I can open up my images here. This program, it comes standard with the printer, so it's PC-based software that runs on some computer. If you have other computers, you can drop files into a network folder and print from it. So the software, when it comes up, this shows me this pattern that I have. And it shows me this little area. I have 24-inch paper in the printer, so it's telling me this area is not going to print. So I can come over and do some fun things to it. So we can take this pattern and repeat it. So if I need this to be 100 yards long, we'll just continue to nest it together so it'll repeat over and over again. Yeah.
What kind of file format does it import? Is it strictly, I mean, can it do an AI file, a PDF, Photoshop file, and what kind of files can you import into it?
Good news is basically any of the graphic formats that you're probably used to.
AI is probably the one exception.
AI, yeah. So the spots that,
Save it or EPS.
Okay.
yeah, if you can't, what I'd say is AI because there's, do you want the artboard, do you want the whole design file, do you want just the graphic? There's a lot of questions and decisions that come with it, and are the fonts embedded or not. If you have a file, PDF or an EPS file, works great with that. That way all the transparencies, the layers, everything works really well with it. But basically any graphic format, I'll open up my file over here, my file formats. I know it's kind of short, but you can see there's a PostScript here in file, PDF, EPS, JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, PostScript file, or sorry, Photoshop file, PNGs, targets. There's some stuff in here that I don't think people use graphic standards anymore. But basically, as long as if you're running anything from Illustrator or Apparel, you'll be able to kick out a file that this can be used. A lot of times, people typically like to use TIFFs for like graphic things, just because there's no compression or no loss of image, or PNG files, things that compress sometimes work pretty well. On DieSub, if you know that the final result, this is the image is sized right, just even a JPEG file works okay. If it's low res though, JPEGs can have that format loses some detail if it's really busy graphics. So I have my design that just popped up here. This is a roughly 12 by 12 design. I can take this and I'm going to add this to my layout over here. And then duplicate this. So we can print and then I'm going to just have an overlap a little bit.
So is that the full-blown software, or is this just the generic that comes with the machine?
So the software that comes with it is a full functioning version of Wasatch software. On the 6200, it's the Wasatch software. On our 64-inch wide ones, it's the textile edition. They have repeat features and some other color finding tools. The only thing is, I shouldn't say only thing, but the main difference is it's specific to the Epson printer. So if you did want to drive, you got this, but you also want to drive HP and solvent printers and some other models too as well. I think there's an upgrade path to be able to get to the full capabilities of it. So I got my files there. I just click the print button. So what is happening right now is just basically in the software, it makes it really kind of a simple interface. I can bring in my files. I didn't really get into it, but up top here I can choose my settings. While the printer is doing this thing, I can come in here and there's some different stuff. If I want to put crop marks, because if I'm doing coffee mugs, I got a 44-inch by printer. I don't need that, but I put 4 coffee mugs side by side. So I'm going to put crop marks in and make it really easy to cut. I'm using the craft deck cutter, or I'm using the built-in cutter. It's really easy to do. There's different settings that are in here depending on the type of material. So I use the papers, my applications. So Chromolux metal. This is the metal sample that's totally done. By putting in here, I'll put the printer in a much higher resolution mode. Color profiles that are designed for that material. I'm using this right now with Easy Textile text. So this has all my. This is going to be a little bit farther than we need to get into, but in here I can get into the printer settings and all the nuts and bolts underneath the hood. The great thing is all these are done to come with the software, so you just plug them in and draw it running. Yes?
With the cutting options, this will work on any of the major cutting brands that you do and all that.
It can. Those are additional options that can be added with, like I said, craft text, zooms, any icon base.
But that needs an upgrade version of the software.
So we do a lot of, most of the options are kind of a la carte